two of the most ruthless prison gangs in America, the Mexican Mafia and Nuestra Familia, have been at war for over 50 years. A war that started over something as petty as a stolen pair of shoes, but escalated into one of the bloodiest rivalries in prison history. From brutal prison riots to street executions, this war has left bodies in its wake from California's toughest prisons to the cold streets of Los Angeles and San Jose. But what really started this war? And why couldn't the Mexican Mafia control the northern street gangs the way they did in the South? Today, we're diving deep into the origins of this deadly feud, the power plays, the betrayals, and the names behind the bloodshed. This is the untold story of the war between the Mexican Mafia and Nuestra Familia. Let's get into it. The Mexican Mafia, or La Eme, was founded in 1957 at Dowell Vocational Institution, DVI, in Tracy, California. It started as a prison protection group for Chicano gang members from Los Angeles and other Southern California neighborhoods. La Eme quickly grew into a violent organization, running drug rings, extortion, and murder operations inside California prisons. Nuestra Familia was formed in 1968 at Soledad Prison, made up primarily of inmates from Northern California. Many were farm workers from rural areas, constantly belittled by La Eme, who called them farm boys and treated them as second-class criminals. Tensions boiled over when a Mexican Mafia member stole a pair of shoes from a Norteño inmate in 1968. This sparked a prison riot, leading to multiple deaths and the birth of Nuestra Familia as a rival to La Eme. Nuestra Familia's influence didn't just stay behind bars. It extended to the streets. By the 1980s and 1990s, Northern California gangs aligned with Nuestra Familia, becoming Norteños. Meanwhile, the Mexican Mafia's street soldiers, the Sureños, controlled Southern California. Why couldn't La Eme control the North? Geographic divide. The vast distance between Northern and Southern California meant La Eme had less influence over gangs in places like San Jose, Salinas, and Stockton. La Eme's arrogance. Mexican Mafia members looked down on Northern inmates, refusing to let them rise in their ranks. This fueled resentment, making it easy for NF to recruit soldiers. Nuestra Familia's structured loyalty system. NF enforced strict loyalty codes, punishing any members who betrayed them. They also indoctrinated young gang members into their system before La Eme could. The Norteño-Sureño War. Spilling into the streets, Nuestra Familia directly ordered northern street gangs to attack Sureño-affiliated gangs, leading to decades of drive-bys, murders, and gang warfare. The San Quentin Massacre on August 21, 1972, was one of the bloodiest prison attacks in California history. It was a meticulously planned ambush between the Mexican Mafia and Nuestra Familia, resulting in multiple deaths, stabbings, and a complete lockdown of the prison, build-up to the massacre. San Quentin was already a pressure cooker for racial and gang tensions. The prison was home to key leaders from both La Eme and NF, including Rodolfo Cheyenne Cadena of La Eme and Robert Babo Sosa of Nuestra Familia. The Mexican Mafia was smuggling drugs and extorting prisoners, creating resentment among Norteño inmates. Prison officials, including Warden Luis S. Nelson, had ignored rising tensions, despite warnings from guards and intelligence officers. The attack at approximately 10:30 a.m. in Cell Block B, Nuestra Familia members ambushed La Eme leaders in the yard. Armed with shanks made from sharpened metal scraps, NF soldiers rushed Mexican Mafia members, stabbing them repeatedly. Correctional officers James Prater and Alfred McCullough sounded the alarm. but the riot had already exploded into chaos. Rodolfo Cheyenne Cadena, one of La Eme's most powerful members, was stabbed over 50 times before his body was thrown off the tier. Multiple NF members, including Hector Mad Dog Ramirez, took part in the assault, ensuring that no survivors would be left. Aftermath: 5 confirmed deaths, with dozens injured. The prison went on lockdown for over 3 months. The attack solidified Nuestra Familia as a major power inside California prisons. La Eme vowed revenge, leading to a cycle of retaliatory killings. The 1978 Folsom prison riot was another key moment in the war between La Eme and Nuestra Familia, erupting into one of the most violent prison clashes in California history. Unlike previous skirmishes, this riot was not a spur-of-the-moment attack, but a coordinated, premeditated assault by both gangs in a bid for dominance over Folsom Prison, build up to the riot by 1978. Tensions in Folsom State Prison were at an all-time high. The Mexican Mafia controlled much of the heroin trade inside the prison, using their connections to smuggle in drugs from Los Angeles. Nuestra Familia, determined to break La Eme's stranglehold on the drug trade, began stockpiling weapons, shanks, metal rods, and homemade explosives. Inmates warned prison officials, including Warden Jack R. Duck, about an imminent war, but officials failed to act in time. The riot, on September 14, 1978, at approximately 2:15 p.m., in Cell Block C, a Nuestra Familia hit squad launched a surprise attack on a group of Mexican Mafia members during yard time. La Eme soldiers, including Manuel Tati Torres and Carlos P-Face Romero, were targeted first, stabbed repeatedly in the chest and abdomen. Correctional officers Paul Snyder and Raymond Balcom attempted to intervene, but were overwhelmed by the chaos. Within minutes, over 30 inmates joined the melee, attacking with improvised knives, steel pipes, and fists. Gunshots rang out as guards in the watchtowers fired warning shots to break up the riot, but the fighting continued for nearly 15 minutes. Casualties and aftermath: 4. Mexican Mafia members were killed. Among them was Manuel Tati Torres, who was rumored to be the mastermind behind La Eme's heroin operations inside Folsom. 3 Nuestra Familia members were fatally wounded. Over 20 inmates were hospitalized, including several who suffered permanent injuries. The prison was placed on lockdown for over 4 months. Following the riot, Folsom prison officials cracked down on both gangs, leading to multiple transfers of high-ranking members. Despite the lockdown, violence between La Eme and Nev continued, with each gang issuing death warrants against the other's members. The 1998 Pelican Bay hit on Joe Pegleg Morgan was a high-profile assassination attempt that nearly resulted in the death of one of the Mexican Mafia's most influential leaders. Build up to the assassination attempt by the late 1990s, Pelican Bay State Prison had become ground zero for the war between La Eme and Nuestra Familia. Joe Pegleg Morgan, a founding member of the Mexican Mafia, was one of the most feared and respected leaders in the organization. Morgan was responsible for overseeing high-level drug trafficking operations between La Eme and cartel suppliers from Mexico. Nuestra Familia leaders, including Gerald Cuete Rubalcaba and Cornelio Corny Tristan, saw Morgan as a primary target because of his deep connections to cartel money. NF operatives in Pelican Bay's Security Housing Unit, SHU, began planning an assassination attempt to eliminate Morgan and disrupt La Eme's leadership. The attack on October 27, 1998, around 3:40 p.m., Morgan was escorted from his cell in the SHU to the prison's medical wing for a routine checkup. Two Nuestra Familia assassins, Juan Cobra Luna and Richard Silent Mendoza, managed to conceal makeshift shanks inside their prison jumpsuits. As Morgan was being led back from the medical wing, the two NF members rushed him from behind, stabbing him multiple times in the back and neck. Correctional officers Roger Meade and Thomas Gallagher immediately intervened, managing to pull Morgan away before the attackers could finish him off. One of the shanks was recovered. It was a sharpened piece of metal wrapped in cloth for grip. Casualties and aftermath. Joe "Pegleg" Morgan survived the attack, but suffered critical injuries that left him hospitalized for several weeks. Juan Cobra Luna and Richard Silent Mendoza were immediately placed in solitary confinement, but NF members inside the prison celebrated the attack as a symbolic victory. Despite Morgan surviving, the attack weakened his health significantly, and he died from liver cancer a year later. In 1999, Eme issued several retaliatory hits on Nuestra Familia members in other prisons, escalating the violence further. The 2013 Salinas Valley prison riot was one of the largest and bloodiest clashes between the Mexican Mafia and Nuestra Familia in modern history. This riot wasn't just a random outburst of violence. It was a premeditated, large-scale attack that left multiple inmates dead and prison officials scrambling for control. Build up to the riot, Salinas Valley State Prison, SVSP, had been a hotbed of gang activity for years, with Nuestra Familia maintaining a strong presence in Facility C. Mexican Mafia associates, including key Sureño shot callers, were transferred into the prison, which disrupted the delicate balance of power inside. In early 2013, tensions rose when NF members attacked a Sureño-linked inmate in the Chow Hall, leading to a series of retaliatory stabbings over the next few months. Intelligence reports indicated that both gangs were stockpiling weapons, homemade shanks, razor blades, and even zip guns, leading prison officials to issue warnings about an imminent clash. Despite efforts to separate key figures, gang leaders passed coded messages, kites, ordering a coordinated attack. The riot on March 7, 2013, at approximately 10:45 a.m., a group of around 50 norteños launched an ambush on Sureños during the main yard's recreational time. Correctional officers Jonathan Parks and Michael Delgado were the first to witness the chaos unfold as inmates pulled out makeshift knives and began stabbing their rivals. Within seconds, the yard turned into a battlefield, with norteños targeting key Mexican Mafia-affiliated inmates, stabbing them dozens of times in brutal gang-style executions. Multiple Sureños attempted to fight back, resulting in a violent melee that spread to multiple areas of the yard. Guards fired multiple warning shots, but the riot continued for nearly 15 minutes before tactical teams stormed the yard with tear gas and rubber bullets. Casualties and aftermath: 3 confirmed deaths, including Luis Shadow Medina, a high-ranking Mexican Mafia associate. Over 20 inmates suffered critical stab wounds, some requiring emergency medical treatment. Multiple weapons were recovered, including 12 sharpened metal shanks, plastic blades, and makeshift clubs wrapped in cloth. The prison went into a full lockdown for over 3 months, with authorities transferring several high-ranking NF and La Eme members to Pelican Bay's SHU, Security Housing Unit. The riot triggered more retaliatory violence in other California prisons, proving once again that the war between La Eme and NEF was far from over. The 1992 secret peace treaty between the Mexican Mafia and Nuestra Familia was an unprecedented and highly controversial attempt to end the decades-long conflict between the two prison gangs. Unlike later truces, this agreement was conceived behind closed doors, orchestrated by high-ranking members from both organizations who believed that a ceasefire would be more profitable and strategic than continued bloodshed. However, the fragile peace quickly unraveled as younger gang members, internal betrayals, and ongoing power struggles shattered the agreement. Why did both sides want a truce? By the early 1990s, California prison systems were under extreme pressure, with escalating violence between norteños and sureños, leading to weekly murders and mass lockdowns. The Mexican Mafia and Nuestra Familia were both expanding their control over street gangs, making it more profitable to cooperate rather than fight. High-ranking leaders from both gangs were concerned about law enforcement cracking down on their operations, particularly with the increasing use of RICO, Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, indictments. Leaders from both sides saw potential business opportunities in collaborating on drug distribution, extortion rings, and money laundering. Secret meetings between leaders. In early 1992, key members from both gangs arranged a series of clandestine meetings inside Pelican Bay State Prison's SHU, Security Housing Unit. Nuestra Familia representatives included Antonio Chuco Guillen and Art T-Bone Ramirez, while La Eme was represented by Joe Jojo Pacina and Daniel Black Dan Barella. Negotiations were conducted through carefully coded messages, kites, smuggled between high-security units and verified by neutral gang associates. A verbal agreement was reached by March 1992, outlining terms that both organizations would abide by. Key aspects of the peace treaty: Non-Aggression Pact. La Eme and NF agreed to halt all direct attacks on each other's members inside prison facilities. Business Partnership. Both organizations would cooperate in drug distribution and street-level racketeering, preventing overlapping turf disputes. Street gang ceasefire. Norteño and Sureño sets were ordered to avoid open conflict in key drug trafficking zones like Los Angeles, San Jose, and Fresno. Prison power consolidation. Leaders agreed to focus on expanding their economic and political power in prison, rather than wasting resources on continuous internal war. Why the truce failed younger. Gang members rejected the truce. Many up-and-coming Norteño and Sureño gangsters had grown up hating the opposing side and saw peace as a betrayal of their cause. Internal betrayals and power struggles. Some mid-level La Eme and NF members used the truce as an opportunity to maneuver for power, secretly ordering attacks while pretending to uphold the agreement. Street-level violence continued. Even as leaders ordered peace, gang sets on the outside continued killing each other, largely ignoring the treaty. The 1992 High Desert Prison stabbing. In September 1992, an NF soldier, Ruben Ghost Castro, was murdered by a Sureño in High Desert State Prison, which immediately shattered the ceasefire. Law enforcement crackdowns. California prison officials became aware of the truce and saw it as an attempt to consolidate power rather than reduce violence, leading to mass transfers of key players. Aftermath of the failed peace treaty. By early 1990, the truce was completely abandoned, and the war resumed with full force. Retaliation killings skyrocketed, with Nuestra Familia members executing multiple Eme soldiers across various prison yards. The truce failure led to some of the bloodiest years in prison gang history, particularly from 1994 to 1997, when violence peaked across California state prisons. Both organizations became even more structured and militarized, learning from the failed peace to tighten internal discipline and strengthen their leadership chains. Despite the ambitious nature of the 1992 peace treaty, the deep-rooted hatred and criminal agendas on both sides made long-term peace impossible. The failed agreement only hardened both gangs' commitment to total dominance, ensuring that the war would continue for decades to come. The 2018 attempted truce between Nuestra Familia and the Mexican Mafia was a highly controversial and fragile peace effort that, for a brief moment, seemed to offer hope of ending the decades-long bloodshed. However, it ultimately collapsed under internal pressure, distrust, and continued violence. Why did authorities push for a truce? By 2018, California prison officials were struggling with overcrowding and increasing violence. Riots, stabbings, and murders had been escalating between Sureños and Norteños, leading to dozens of casualties in multiple state prisons. Officials at Pelican Bay State Prison, Corcoran State Prison, and Salinas Valley State Prison proposed an experimental plan to integrate rival gang members into the same general population units. The goal was to reduce the power of prison gang leaders by cutting off their ability to control segregated units. Secret meetings between leaders. In mid-2018, intelligence sources reported that high-ranking members of La Eme and NF held secret meetings inside Pelican Bay's SHU, Security Housing Unit. Nuestra Familia leaders, including David D.C. Cervantes and James Conejo Perez, allegedly agreed to peace talks with Mexican Mafia figures like Jose Joeboy Gonzalez and Ruben Knight Owl Castro. Witnesses claim that gang members used coded messages, kites, to pass truce orders down to their foot soldiers on the yards, key aspects of the truce ceasefire. Between Sureños and Norteños, orders were sent to prison yards and street-level gang members to avoid direct conflict. Mutual business agreements. Both gangs agreed to work together on drug trafficking operations, splitting profits instead of competing. A new prison economy. With fewer riots disrupting daily prison operations, gangs saw an opportunity to expand their influence over drug sales, gambling, and extortion rings. Why the truce failed younger. Gang members rejected the truce. Many Norteños and Sureños on the yards refused to follow the orders, seeing the agreement as a betrayal of their gang's legacy. Retaliation murders. In late 2018, an NF soldier, Antonio Smokey Rivera, was murdered by a Sureño inside High Desert State Prison, which immediately reignited tensions. La Eme leaders were divided. Some Mexican Mafia members, particularly those with deep ties to street gang profits, refused to cooperate, seeing Norteños as long-term enemies. Prison officials abandoned the experiment. By early 2019, violence had erupted in multiple facilities, leading authorities to reinstate strict gang segregation policies. Aftermath of the failed truce. The truce collapsed completely by 2019, leading to a wave of retaliatory killings inside and outside prison walls. California prison officials reinstated lockdowns in key facilities like Pelican Bay and Corcoran. Street-level violence increased as Norteños and Sureños resumed their territorial battles in Los Angeles, San Jose, and the Central Valley. Some high-ranking gang members who had supported the truce were later targeted for execution. viewed as traitors to the cause. Despite this brief attempt at peace, the deep-rooted hatred and gang politics proved too strong to overcome. The war between La Eme and Nuestra Familia continued just as brutally as before. Decades of bloodshed, broken truces, and endless war. Can La Eme and Nuestra Familia ever find peace? Or is this battle eternal? Drop a comment with your thoughts, like, and subscribe for more real crime stories daily.